Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom to those who are on Zoom. We can see your faces. It's always wonderful to see a kahal, even if you're in the sanctuary in a very different way. And we want to welcome anyone who's here for the first time, wherever you are in the world, in whatever time zone. We're all here to make the transition to welcome Shabbat and to feel a different kind of connectedness, to unplug on the one hand from the ways we function in the week, even if we're still using a device to participate in services and to plug in to the soul and to the expansiveness of what it means to welcome in Shabbat and to the openness of what sometimes we close down. So I invite everyone to turn to Yedid Nefesh on page 10 or on page 252, which is really a reach out to God as a lover, as a longing for connection. And we're all longing for connection these days. And so let's try to find a way to answer that through our prayers today. Turn now to page 11 or page 254, Lechon Aranana, to go out and sing to God on this Shabbat.
Lechon Aranana, Adonai, Ri'a letzur ish'enu, lekadma fanav betodah, bizmirat nari'a lo.
Page 13 and page 254, Shiru Adonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Adonai, Kol Haaretz.
Shiru Adonai, Baruch Shemo, Baseru miyom leyom, Yeshuato, Sapru v'goyim, Kevodo, Bechol Gadol Adonai, Umulal me'od, Norahu, Al kol Elohim, Kol Elohim, Amineim, V'Adonai Shamayim Hazzan. Kabul Adonai, Be'adat Kodesh, Imru Mipanav, Kol Haaretz, Imru V'Goyim, Adonai Malach, Avtikon Tevel, V'Timot, Yadinavim, Be'Mesharim, Yismechu Hashamayim, V'Nagel Haaretz, ישפוט הארץ, ישפוט תבל וצדק, ואמין ואמונתו, היי אליי, היי אליי,
שם אהבה תשמח ציון ותגלנה בנות יהודה למען משפטך זרו על הצדיק ולשרי לב שמחה שמחו צדיקים באדוני והודו לזכר קודשו
Page 17, מזמור שיר לאדוני, שיר חדש, ונמלט מהחדש, שיר ליום זרוע קודשו, הודיע ישועתנו, זכר חסדו ונועתו לבק ישועתו. הריעו לאדוני, וצבצחו עלינו וזמרו בחירם. ירם הים ומלוא תבל ויוש והירה, נערות ימחה וכף, יחד הרים ירננו.
לפני אדוני כי ישפוט הארץ, ישפוט טבע בצדק, ועמים במישרים.
Page 19, page 258, Adonai malach b'sher Zion malach. Adonai b'tzion gadol v'ravoah, hallelujah, v'yodu shemach gadol v'tanah.
משה ואהרון וכהניו ושמואל בקוראי שמו קוראים אל אדוני והוא יענה. אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו.
Page 21 or page 260, if you're able to rise, you can.
מזמור לדוד הבו לאדוני בני אלי הבו לאדוני כבוד ועוז. כבוד שמו ישחק לאדוני לעבודת קודש ולאדוני על המים אל הכבוד יביא לבנון, וירקידם כמו עגל לבנון וסינות כמו בהרים. קול אדוני קוצר לאבותיך, קול אדוני יכיל מדבר, יכיל אדוני מדבר קדש, קול אדוני יקולל הים ויבשור יערון ובהבנו כולו אומר כבוד. אדוני למבול ישב וישב אדוני מלך לעולם, אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. ירדאי ירדאי
Be seated. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
The famous moment in this week's parasha of the switching, the deception of the blessing that Yitzchak gives. He thinks he's going to give to Esav, and he ends up giving to Yaakov, is helped, of course, or intentional, or divine, depending on how you understand it, because Yitzchak's eyes are dimmed. And the Torah says, Vayihi ki zaken Yitzchak, vatichena einav, meraot vayikra et Esav, beno hagadol. When Isaac was old, and his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older son Esav. This dimming of the eyes is not a frequent expression in the Torah. It's used in one other place, and it's at the very end of the Torah with regard to Moshe, actually. But unlike Yitzchak, whose eyes are dim, it says about Moshe, as he's approaching his, Moshe was 120 years old. That's why we say to people, you should live ad esrim mea ve'esrim, up until 120. Moshe was 120 years old when he died, and then the Torah says, Lo kahata eino velo nas lecho. His eyes were not dim, and his vigor unabated. And so commentators ask, what was it that was the difference between Yitzchak and Moshe, that Yitzchak's eyes were dimmed, and that Moshe had not dimmed vision, that he had vigor in his elder years. And one of the main reasons these differences are pointed out is that Yitzchak never leaves the land of Israel, and Moshe never arrives in the land of Israel. And so there's a lot to be said about that difference, what it means to never leave and then never have to see a horizon, to be in one place and not have to look elsewhere because you're always at home. And whereas Moshe was always looking to arrive at the promised land, and so his eyes had to stay powerful and oriented towards vision. And there's a critique in the sense of the dimming of the eyes, of course, which is that if one is always settled, one is never striving. And Yitzchak, of course, is the most passive of our patriarchs. He is acted upon more than he acts himself. And Becca pointed out in a Devar Torah this week, that he's always doing the things that happened before. He's digging the wells of his ancestors. He passes his wife off as his sister, just like his dad did. A stunning quality. And there's a sense that if one is not searching, if one is not seeking, then one is not looking. Then one doesn't need the eyes. And Moshe had his vision because he was a man of vision in many ways. Now we know, of course, that Yitzchak, also his vision impairment, there's a lot of reasons given to why his eyes were dimmed. And in fact, because his eyes were dimmed, that was part of the prophecy that allowed for Yaakov to receive the blessing. So many ways it's seen as an intended act that God willed also his eyes to be dimmed. But it's an interesting thing that we're holding in our time about being settled right now, because most of us are not going anywhere. And most of us shouldn't be going anywhere. It's important, I think, on the Shabbat before Thanksgiving, that we recognize that we're in a moment of great importance in terms of the health and safety of everyone, and that at this time there is a value, a profound importance of staying settled, of keeping at home, of staying in the Mikdash Ma'at, the small sanctuary, and the small pod that we've been staying in. And part of actually one of the beautiful teachings about Isaac, Yitzchak, being settled in his place is that the land, which is of course the Holy Land according to our tradition, actually nourished him so, which is how he had the intuition and the channeling of God's energy in order to give the blessing to Yaakov at all. So in fact, the holiness of the place was the nourishment that made possible for the offering of the blessing. And so I invite on this Shabbat the aspect of Yitzchak that says, stay at home, stay centered, stay in your most intimate of places, in order that what lives where you are can be the nourishment that you can give out in blessing. Someone on a call this week that we had said they typically have 30 people for Thanksgiving, and obviously that wasn't going to be happening, and so they sent some of the recipes to all their different friends and family that would be with them in order to pour out, to give their blessing outward while staying at home. And simultaneously, those last sentences, psukim of the Torah about Moshe, are always kind of heart-wrenching to say goodbye to Moshe at the end of the Torah, and to hear that line, Lo kahata eino velo naslecho, that his eyes were not dimmed and his vigor didn't diminish. That we have to keep that hope too. That in many ways our tradition, it's a Moshe tradition of looking towards a promised land. There is an end in sight. There will be a time when we will be able to get up and walk. There will be a time when the sanctuary will be full again. There will be a vision for a different kind of country. And if we want to stay alert to what that looks like, we have to keep our eyes on the prize. But we can do that by staying centered right now and staying at home. And so I bless us with the blessing of Yitzchak that could nourish and awaken God's energy to send something to the next generation that was pure and holy. And one of the aspects of Yitzchak's blessing to Yaakov, who he thought was Esav, or though he might have known, was that he could grant in what we do God's gift of offering. That in all the ways, because Esav was a material man in the hands, that in all we do that we would have Elohut, God's presence. And we can do that at home. And I also grant us the strength and the years of Moshe, who had the tenacity, really the tenacity of spirit, to wander in the desert, to lead a pretty complicated people, and to always want to go to a promised land that we could imagine was filled with love and justice and peace and dignity. And that we should always look beyond the horizon. There is always somewhere to look. And we should never ultimately, at least in our soul, be settled, which is the teaching of Moshe. We turn now to Lecha Dodi on page 23 in Lev Shalem and on page 262 in Sim Shalom.
דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה
לך דודי לקראת קלה
פני שבת נקבלה
שמו וזכו בדיבור אחד השמיענו אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ושמו תפארת ונתינה
לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי מקור הברכה בראש מקדם נסוכה סוף המעשה במחשבה תהילה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה
מקדש מלכים מלוכה ומצאים מתוך אפיך רב לך שווה בעמק הברכה והוא יחבור עלייך חמה
לך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה 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 התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך קומי אורי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בשבת נקבלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בשבת נקבלה. שבת נקבלה, היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת כלה, איי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה, איי 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 לך דודי, איי 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 לקראת כלה, איי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה. וימין ושמאל תפרוצי, ואת אדוני תריצי, על יד איש בן פרצי, ונשמחה ונגינה, איי 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 לך דודי, איי 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 לקראת כלה, איי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה, איי 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 לך דודי, איי 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 לקראת כלה, איי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה. שלום עטרת ברא, גם בשמחה ובצורה, חלה שבת המלכה, היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה, היי 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 לך דודי, היי 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 לקראת כלה, היי 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 בני שבת, בני שבת נקבלה.
I was just thinking that Rolly and I went to the church this week to record something for their Thanksgiving Sunday service, and I hadn't been in the church in a long time. Most of us haven't been in the church in a long time, not only because we haven't been in any place for a long time, but because we haven't been at the church. We missed being there for High Holy Days. And I was thinking that my first experience of being at BJ when I was in graduate school in Los Angeles, getting my master's in Jewish education, I came to visit some friends from camp in New York when I was back with my family, and I went to this church. And we sat up in the balcony. I had no idea where we were. I was not regular in being in the city. And I have this very, very strong image of that melody and people dancing, which was a very unfamiliar experience for me. And just that image of what it meant to like be at the top of this very big and spacious church and have people dance to this melody with such joy and enthusiasm. And it's a different use of sight, you know, that sometimes we get to sit on a perch and experience something that's not ours yet and then find our way in. And we're all, I think, trying to use our vision in different ways to both evoke memory and find our ways to plug in ways that will be nourishing and remind us of places where we were infused with newness and joy, and use our mind's eye also to bring us back to moments that remind us we'll have that again someday soon. Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbat, page 27 or page 266.
שבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר שמך היום להגיד בבוקר חסדך
Magadlu is about 8 lines from the bottom.
מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך הללויה מעשיך מאוד עמקו Page 29 or page 266. עדותיך נאמרו מאוד לביתך נבע קודש אדוני לאורך ימים.
We turn now to Arvit, the evening service on page 39a in Lev Shalem, and page 279 in Sim Shalom. If you're able to, please rise for Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai ha-mevorach. Baruch Adonai ha-mevorach le'olam va'ed.
בהם חיינו ויארך ימינו ובהם נגע יומם ולילה ואהבתך תשים ממנו לעולם יהי ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם מאוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. We turn now to Michamocha, page 44 in Lam Shalem, and page 290 in Sim Shalom.
ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך ואלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף אלה נורא תהילות אוסף אלה מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה זרי ענו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד נאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We pray for peace on page 45 or on page
292.
292. Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu Shalom Avinu Malkeinu L'chaim Ufos Avinu Sukkot. What's up, This is the moment you're invited to rise when we sing Ufros Aleinu, Sukkot Shalomecha is the moment when we're traditionally told that we receive the Neshama Yetera, the extra soul, or the expanded soul. So if you need a little breath, a little expansion, we all need a little bit of openness and expandedness on the Shabbat.
Sukkot Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei Tevel ve'al Yerushalayim.
Mishamru, page 46 or page 294.
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעלמא דברה קירותה וימליך מלכותה בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יש ברבם מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך.
וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתענן שמי קודשא ברכו לעיניו ינקום ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירה מעמה ויראו אמן.
We face Yerushalayim. If you're able to turn to the Silent Amidah, page 47 in Lev Shalem, or page 296 in Sim Shalom with the formal text and the Siddur, the prayers of your own heart. We turn now to in Shabbat, page 53 or page 314, Vayechulu.
Vayikadesh oto, ki bo Shabbat mikom
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון קונה שמיים וארץ.
מגן אבות בדברו וחיים פתים ואמרו, האל הקדוש שאין כמוהו.
המניח דמו ביום שבת קודשו, כי בם רצה וניחם.
לפניו נעבוד ביראה בפחד, ונודה לשמו בכל יום תמיד.
מאוד הברכות אל הודעות אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ומערך שביעי.
ומניח פיתושה למד ושני עונג.
זכר למעשה בראשית.
אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, רצה במנוחתנו וקדשנו מצוותיך, ותן חלקנו בתורתך. שבנו מטובך ושמח נפשנו בישועתך, ותאר ליבנו לעובדך באמת. והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה ורצון שבת קודשך, וינוחו בישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Kaddish Shalem, page 54, or page 316.
יתגדל ויתקדש מרבה, בעלמא דברה כאילו תממליך מלכותו בחייכון וביומכון ובכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יש מרבה מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך.
ישבח ויפאר וישועם וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקדושה. לעמים כל ברכתה ושירתה, תשבחתה ונחמתה, דם ירם בעלמא ויאמרו
אמן. תתקבל תודה ותון לכו ישראל קדמו ונשמע ואמרו
אמן. ישל אמר רבה מנשמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו ויעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל יושבי תבל ואמרו
Kiddush is on page 55 or page 318. We invite you, if you have a cup of Kiddush at home, a Kiddush cup with wine or juice or something else. Just have to change the bracha if it's something else. The first part of it.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורצבנו ושבת קודשו, באהבה וברצון הנחילנו זיכרון למעשה בראשית, כי הוא יום תחילה למקרא הקודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. קיוונו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
So always on Parshat Toldot, I think of
When I lived in Los Angeles to get my master's in Jewish education, I would spend every, other Friday at a old age home, a nursing Jewish home, to do like a very early Kabbalat Shabbat song leading and stuff, similar a little bit to what we did outside the stuff today. And there was a man named Yitzchak who was blind and in a wheelchair, and he would always come. He would be wheeled into the space, and we would sing, and I would greet him, and he would hold my hands on the way out. And when I was moving back from Los Angeles to New York, when I said goodbye to him, he put his hands on my head and he gave me Birkat Kohanim, the priestly blessing. And I don't know about you, but if I didn't grow up being blessed on Friday night. I was very blessed, and we had many rituals in my home, but it was the first time that I felt that I was blessed, that I was given a blessing. And it was extremely powerful to feel that a human being can channel something special to you. You know, I wasn't a child, as a parent blesses, but there was about the relationship and something in the power of those words that translates and carries something of God through it, or whatever you might call, whether it's holiness, or we all have different names for what that feeling is. So I just to think a moment about if we've ever felt a blessing like that from someone, or maybe what was the first time we felt that kind of blessing, as we sing Hamalach Ogoal Oti, when this is typically the time we invite our children to come under the talit. But it's always a reminder to me on Parshat Toldot, you don't need to be a child to have that blessing. It's a blessing that is everlasting. Since it's recited in Parashat Naso in the Torah until today, it carries that sense of holiness with it.
המלאך הגואל אותי, המלאך הגואל אותי מכל רע, יברך את הנערים וקרב בהם שמי. ושם אבותיי ושם אבותיי אברהם ויצחק והתגוררו בקרב הארץ.
So if someone is near you, feel free to hold their hand, put your hands on their head. If someone is not near you, you can extend your arms to anyone around, or put your hands over your heart. Yisimcha Elohim ke'Ephraim u'Manasseh, Yisimech Elohim ke'Sara Rivka Rachel v'Leah, Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. Aleinu, page 56 or page 300 and something. 320.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
ככתוב ובתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
We now turn to Mourner's Kaddish on page 58 or on page 324. If you're on the Zoom and you're a mourner or marking a yard site, we invite you to unmute so you can say Kaddish in the Minyan. Kaddish Yatom. Yitgadal v'kadash shemei Rabba v'amad yibrach mutei v'amlich machutei v'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabba v'barach le'olam omer omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei d'kudesha b'rechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru amen. And be seated. Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
I'm going to ask you in a minute if you have one of those moments when you remember a first blessing. Okay? So we want to say Mazal Tov to Ali, Aaron, and Lila Vinny on the birth of their daughter and sister Ada, who was born this week. Mazal Tov.
Mazal tov.
Mazal Tov. It's very beautiful, and we're really happy for their family. She was deeply wanted and waited for a long time. We tomorrow morning we'll have services at 9:30 for Shabbat Parashat Toldot. There's the Zoom for members only, BJ live stream and Facebook Live, and following services, Ari will have some more soulful singing of Shabbat Zmiro, which is very beautiful. Tomorrow evening at 5:20 we'll join for Mariv. And then afterwards, there'll be a mindful Havdalah. There's now this whole schedule. The third Shabbat of the month, we have outdoor, weather permitting. It was gorgeous tonight. Outside, like pre-Kabbalat Shabbat singing. And on Havdalah is mindfulness Havdalah with Shuli and Dave. So we hope everyone will participate in that. We want to remind everyone that obviously there's Minyan every day, 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the afternoon, and 6:30 in the evening. This week, Thanksgiving morning, Shacharit will be at 9:30. And I just say again, our COVID re-entry task force met this week to discuss our policies in light of obviously the concern as the weather changes and the increasing rates around the country, but also in our city, including the closing of New York public schools. Our policies for now are staying the same. Obviously, any events we have outside, people will be at a distance and face coverings and at a maximum of 50. And we do all the tracing in the building. We're far apart. And the strong recommendation from our public health experts and doctors is please stay home. There was an article in the Atlantic that said cancel Thanksgiving. We shouldn't cancel Thanksgiving. We should just cancel our traveling on Thanksgiving and be at home. And if you're alone, which I know many people are, and there's a lot of loss in not being with family or friends who are family, or in all the ways that we celebrate with the special foods and rituals. Join us for Minyan. It really marks the day and creates an anchor, and there'll be space there to just be together. So I would just invite that, or set up a Zoom Obviously, we're very skilled at that these days, so don't be alone. There's ways to be with community 3 times that day, starting at 9:30 in the morning. And also just to say, at this time, we support the West Side Campaign Against Hunger, which does an incredible job of giving out turkeys for Thanksgiving to so many people who are food insecure, which is rising in huge amounts in our city and will be particularly hard in the winter. So you can always support the West Side Campaign Against Hunger, and part of our Giving Tuesday will be towards that. So what about, do you remember a first time you were blessed, Becca?
So I'll share. I also grew up without having the tradition of being blessed on Friday night using Birkat Kohanim, which is such a beautiful bracha. And my parents were speaking to family friends of ours who then later in life encouraged them to start blessing us, because they said, well, if you have the opportunity to bless your children, why would you not do that? So later in life, that became a part of our relationship, although I agree that I feel very blessed by them throughout my life. But what I am thinking about the most is actually that my parents really took that to heart, in the sense that they didn't want to just do that on Friday night. So anytime I was going someplace, or anytime that we, if I was leaving for school, when I was in college, or a trip, or even sometimes just in the middle of the week, if we had the opportunity to be together, that flowing, that shefa of brachot, that just energy of wanting to be in blessing and blessing me all the time is something that's coming to mind for me.
Beautiful. Ar?
So actually, I was thinking a couple of things. I think we all grew up without this tradition. In my case, my kids are older, and I've been doing it for their entire life, and eventually it's like I own it now, even though it was not part of my tradition. I own it. And many times I actually wonder if, as they grow older, if there's going to be a point where I end because they're not kids anymore. And I have the feeling no. But time will say. But one thing that also came to mind is this experience that I had, and I had it several times, of walking in the street, and then someone, a homeless person, many times will, if you give money, they will give you a blessing.
Yeah.
And kind of like, wow, I don't know, it's a different kind of blessing, but maybe not.
Powerful.
It's very powerful.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So we'll end with Shalom Aleichem, inviting the angels Becca wrote about in the Torah Shabbat this week. All the angels for Shabbat, let them come and join us. Page 722 in Sim Shalom, page 73 in Lev Shalem.
שלום עליכם מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון, מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
שלום עליכם מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון, מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
איי שלום עליכם מלאכי השרת, מלאכי המלאכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. רוחם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלאכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
רוחם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלאכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
רוחם לשלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. שלום מלאכי השלום, מלאכי לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צדקים לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. צדקים לשלום,
מלכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
היי צדקן לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Adonai Oz ve'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech hatamash b'shalom. May God give strength unto God's people. May God bless all God's people with peace. Shabbat shalom to everyone and happy
Shalom.
Thanksgiving.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.